Hi, my name is Jori Leskelä. I am principal lecturer at Tampere University of Applied Sciences in the School of Professional Teacher Education. In this video, I will concentrate on assessment, which is linked to learning. And as it is a question of students' assessment in educational organizations, there are always, or at least there should be, learning objectives published for all the courses delivered. The purpose of assessment nowadays is not only concentrated on measuring students' learning outcomes for grading, that is, to give them marks. The emphasis in many cases should be on enhancing students' development by giving constructive feedback during the studies. In this video, I will talk about assessment philosophy in general and shortly describe the different types of assessment. In the following videos, I will concentrate mostly on the assessment in terms of grading. First, I'd like to clarify what is the difference between terms evaluation and assessment. When it comes to learning and educational organizations, evaluation is a wider concept than assessment. According to Miller, evaluation is systematic examination of all aspects of a course, the selection and ordering of content, the choice of teaching and assessment methods, and the destination of its graduates. And assessment inside the concept of evaluation. Definition: assessment is the measurement of educational achievements or other skills, or the means by which students' progress and achievements are measured, recorded, and communicated to students and to relevant university authorities. Nowadays, assessment is seen a wider concept, not only concentrating on measurement, but also enhancing students' skills and competencies by constructive feedback and by nurturing their ability to assess their own learning. Then who evaluates and what and why to evaluate in general? Teachers evaluate learning environments and teaching methods, their own teaching capabilities of the students' learning outcomes, and why do they evaluate? To support teachers' own development, to develop teaching, to increase the effectiveness of learning. And the students, what do they evaluate? Their own development, their learning outcomes, effectiveness of their learning methods, learning environments, and teaching methods when giving feedback to teachers and learning organizations. And why do they evaluate? The students, to support their own learning, to give feedback in order to support development of learning environments, teaching methods, and assessment methods. And further on, I will concentrate only on assessment. What are the requirements for high quality assessment? First, validity. There's a kind of a warning what not to do. You intend to assess learning outcomes, but you assess memory. That's not high quality assessment. Then about high quality assessment, you teach what you assess what you teach. Reliability, learning outcomes are aligned with the grades you give. Your assessment is fair, just, objective, and unbiased. Your assessment is transparent, and your assessment criteria is transparent and public in the beginning of the course. There's an interesting example of what the grades really tell you. Finnish famous professor Yrjö Engeström several years ago decided, without any warning, to ask students to rewrite the same exam they had done 4 months earlier. The results were: the average mark of the exam reduced dramatically. In the original exam, there were 6 A marks, that means excellent, and 0 in the re-exam. The amount of worst marks, which is -1, in original exam there were only 2 of them, in the re-exam 12. That made Professor Engelström pondering his own philosophy and foundation of assessment. Several things might have gone wrong. You could ask whether Engelström asked wrong questions in the exam, or whether, for example, if it was kind of a learn by heart exam and students forgot what they had learned by heart after 4 months. And then about assessment criteria, about taxonomy of educational objectives. There has to be reasoning and justification for different grades, and students have right to know how they were assessed. And also people, for example, people who hire workers, they expect that there is connection between certain grade and certain competence in the work life. Typical taxonomy of different grades of desired learning outcomes are Bloom's taxonomy and Solo taxonomy. And one important question is, do students have right to know the assessment criteria beforehand so that they know what they have to understand, be able to do, be able to solve? What competencies do they have to get a certain grade? This is one example, revision of Bloom's taxonomy used by a university, Finnish university. First, there are 6 levels of competence. The lowest level described by word remember, and the second, to understand, it's more demanding. Then to apply is more demanding, and analyze, evaluate, and the highest level of competence is to create. And when it's question of remembering, just remembering, it gives answer to the question, are students able to remember facts? And typically when the learning objectives of a course has been designed, these verbs are used for the lowest level of competence, skills. Are students able to recognize something concerning the contents of the course? List, define, name, represent, write, repeat, combine, find, organize. The next level, understand, has the question, are students able to explain concepts and their thoughts? And typical verbs to be used when creating learning objectives describing this level are interpret, give an example, summarize, conclude, redefine, report, name, classify, separate, remodel, explain. Next level, which is quite demanding, apply. Are the students able to use their knowledge in another situation? Are they able to apply their knowledge in real life situations? And the highest level, not typically used on basic courses or not even quite high level courses, to create. Are students able to create new products, thoughts, or perspectives? Then I'd like to tell you something about different types of assessment. And it's not a question of different assessment methods. You find the document concentrating on different types of assessment methods on Moodle. Now it's a question about different purposes for assessment. There are 4 different types of assessment, or 4 different purposes for the assessment. Diagnostic assessment formative, ipsative, and summative assessment. Diagnostic assessment happens before learning, before the course actually starts. Formative and ipsative assessments happen during the studies of a course, and summative assessment happens straight after or at the end of a course. As summative assessment still is kind of mainstream of assessments, I'll start with that. Summative assessment happens, as I mentioned, after learning. It focuses on the learning outcomes. The purpose is to find out what extent of learning outcomes have been met. So it's a question about finally giving students the grades. And the assessment happens by teacher and sometimes also by working life representatives. And then let's start from the beginning of possible assessment. Diagnostic assessment happens before the learning process and before the instructions given how and what to study. It focuses on identifying students' current knowledge, skills, and also pre- and misconceptions. And the purpose is to helps to plan what and how to teach and how to study. Assessment for learning has both diagnostic and formative aspects, happens during the learning process, focuses on the learning process as well. The idea and purpose is to give feedback and feed forward. The assessment happens by students, by the teacher, and by working life representatives. And then assessment as learning, which is kind of the most rare type of assessment. The idea is to monitor and evaluate students' learning. Happens all the time. It happens by the student. It focuses on the learning process, giving students ability, fostering and enhancing students' ability to assess themselves so that they have ability to know and understand what do they know already, how should they learn, how shouldn't they learn, and if they don't learn, why is that? What could be changed? So the responsibility of assessment and the development towards the learning outcomes is more on students' responsibility. But it doesn't happen automatically. Teachers have to teach and facilitate and help guide students to be able to assess their own learning while they are studying. And here, in a nutshell, same kind of information. I'll let you read it by yourself. You can stop the video if you wish to concentrate on this. And then one interesting point of view. Here we have the three types of assessment. Assessment of learning, summative assessment. The idea was to give grades as feedback, mark the grades. And assessment for learning was enhancing students' performance, skills, etc. That is formative assessment. And then assessment as learning was enhancing students' ability to self-assessment, ipsative assessment. The idea here is that according to some specialists, this shows how much each assessment type should be on focus. So only 25% of the time the teacher concentrates on assessment, it should be assessment of learning, to organize exams, skills demonstration, and checking the exam reports and giving students the grades. And also 25% of the time concentrated on assessment should be focused on assessment for learning, giving students feedback of their progress during the course. And what is surprising, half of the time and effort of a teacher should be concentrating on assessment as learning. So concentrating on enhancing students' ability to self-assessment.